Getting out of an abusive relationship early makes a huge difference.
And I'm proud to say I did come in as a victim, but I am a survivor.
Then I could see my mom. My mom was walking toward us, and I got excited. And I was like, there's my mom. And then he didn't stop.
I'm trying to keep it together, I said. I gave in to the tears, and I hated that.
It's not necessarily the easiest process. It's not necessarily the prettiest process, but it is the most effective process. Like, you can do this. I'm going to tell you 100% you can do this, and you're so worth it to do this.
I'm sure losing any child is a real arrow through your heart, but you know, she was great. She was a friend and a family member and our daughter.
It feels just as good the 10th time as it did the first time, to have one of your citizens that you're out there protecting walk up and tell you thank you.
There is one thing stronger in me than fear, and that's my determination. This is Jen Lee, the host of I Need Blue. We share victim-turned-survivor stories. When you come face to face with danger, you learn not to take your safety for granted. Now more than ever, it is important to use facts from real-life situations to reinforce the valuable need of our law enforcement. To hear my story and hear other episodes, visit www.ineedblue.net. I Need Blue does feature graphic themes, including but not limited to violence, abuse, murder, and may not be suitable to all listeners. Some episodes also contain themes which may be triggering. Please take care of yourself and don't hesitate to ask for professional help. Today's topic relates to child abductions. My friend Maya is here to share her story with you. The incident occurred before cell phones existed, and the Amber Alert system wasn't a response resource yet. She will share her story with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And I think one reason this resonates on so many different levels is because the story that I'm going to share is a similar story and yet has three different parts. One where there was no help, one where the police were a presence, but I didn't know what to do with it, and one where the police did show up and they were there for me. This is such a topic that a lot of people don't think about or just think about generally when we hear about the Amber Alerts or when we hear about what goes on. For me, it was a lived reality. And I'll start with the first one. At the age of 5, I was... my mom always met me at where the bus dropped us off at a school, and it was another school where we would be dropped off. I was 5, and my mom wasn't there that day, and I was waiting, and she never showed up. And I just decided, because what 5-year-old wants to hang out, especially when it starts to rain, that I'm just going to stay here because my mom said stay put. All I knew was she wasn't there, and what am I going to do? I started walking, and in order to get to my house, I knew the general idea. My mom and I walked to and from school every day, so I knew the general idea on how to get there. Colfax is a very, very busy street. We always had to cross it, and I remember her teaching me the lesson: press the button in the crosswalk and wait until you see the walk figure, and then you can go. And I was daunted, scared. My mom wasn't there. It had started to rain, but I was determined I was going to make my way home. So at 5, there I am trucking down the road, and I hit the crosswalk button, and I'm standing there. And I remember feeling like I'm doing something bad, but I'm trying to find my mom, so it's okay. And I hit the button, and I was so proud of myself when I watched and I made it across the street. I was so proud of myself. And at the other side of the street was a TV radio repair shop, and there was a gentleman there who was loading a TV or something into his car. And we'd passed by him several times, and he had told us, you know, every time we passed by, hey, come in, come say hi. He was just very friendly, seemed to be a friendly guy. And this time he saw me by myself, and he was putting the stuff in the car, and he's like, "Hey, where's your mom?" And I said, "I don't know. She's late and I'm going home. I'm going to try to find her." And he was like, "Well, I'm loading this in my car, and if you just hold on a minute, I can take you home." And I thought, okay, you don't really, as a 5-year-old, you're not processing this is a bad person, potentially you should run. All I knew is that this was somebody that we had met. And I got in the car, and as he stopped for a minute and he said, here's some candy. I'm going to lock up the shop and then we'll go. And I remember sitting there, and the candy that he gave me were the Smarties, those chalk tasting things that still have addictive qualities. And my mom was very much a health nut. So like I'm sitting there holding these Smarties going, this is so wrong. Like what? So there was already like the feeling of guilt and should I do this? And then I had heard the story that the bad people offer you candy. And I'm like, but it's not the same. I know him, so I'm okay. So he gets in the car, finishes up what he's doing, and I'm still holding the Smarties. And he gets in the car and he says, "Okay, show me how to get to your house." And so I get him down to the end of the street where there's a stop sign, and we were to turn left and managed to turn left. And then as we're driving further, I'm like the apartment, it wasn't really an apartment complex, but it was a retrofitted type thing for housing. And I could see it ahead, and then I could see my mom. My mom was walking toward us, and I got excited. And I was like, "There's my mom." And he didn't stop. And we went past her, and I'm going, "There's my mom."
Yeah.
And we're still moving. And I remember looking up and seeing the light had turned red. And it's one of those, even now as an adult, you try to process how everything happens in those quick moments. But it was one of those, just an awareness of the light's red and he should be stopping. Like, it's not even so much we passed my mom at this point. It's the light's red. He should be stopping. And I felt the car accelerate. And in that moment, it was just all of these awarenesses of something is terribly wrong. And I grabbed the door handle and I threw myself out of the car. And he just zoomed through the red light and kept going. And as I'm throwing myself out of the car, I'm yelling, "Mom!" So she's turning around, and then my world's tumbling because he was going fast enough that I hit the pavement and rolled and scraped myself up pretty heavily. And she came to me, and it's one of those things that we've talked about since, but in that moment, like for her, she didn't know what was happening. She just knew that I'm rolling out of this car, and she grabbed me and she spanked me. And so like I'm sitting there I'm bloody and I'm being spanked, and I don't know why I'm being spanked, and I'm crying, and I'm like, what's going on? And that was an experience of not having police presence, not even at 5, probably not even being aware that someone could have been there to help me. All I knew was mom and red light, and this is wrong. And I still carry a lot of that with me. And I didn't realize, and I'm just going to interject here, I didn't realize how until like 3 years ago, that I didn't realize how much I was still blaming myself. Because I was raised in a fundamentalist religious environment, there was also very much a heavy emphasis on you obey authority. So I had disobeyed my mom. I deserved what had happened to me. And then at the age of 10 or 11, I was sitting at a bus stop waiting to go to school because I had to take city bus to go to school. But it was across from an elementary school. As I'm sitting at the bus stop waiting for the bus to show up, a guy had pulled up, and I had seen the kids going into the school. And so it was around the time that school would be in session or kids would be running late getting to school. And I saw a car pull up in front of me, and I thought he was just another parent, maybe. There was a reason he was there until he got out and stood up. And the way he stood up out of the car, like he was bracing himself for something. And then and this lane was a narrower lane, and he said, "Get in the car." And I just, it's one of those, you don't expect that. And then he said, "I said, get in the car." And at that point, I saw something shiny in his hand. And to this day, it's one of those, was it a knife? Was it a gun? All I knew is that my brain perceived what he had in his hand as a weapon. And at that time, we didn't have cell phones. So it wasn't like he was hiding a cell phone and pretending it was a weapon. There was something that was saying weapon. And I took off. I jumped out of the bench that I was sitting on and took off, just running down the road toward where my house was. And I remember in the moment just that surge of adrenaline, that surge of terror of, this guy is going to hurt me. And as I was running, I remember the sandals that I was wearing that day, and the backs were flapping against my heels, and I could feel them starting to come off. And I was thinking, what do I do? Do I run out of my shoes? Do I keep them in case I stub my, all of those weird things that run through your head as you're running. And I just remember at the same time, like the slats of one of the fences had been marked by brush or trees or bush. And I just remember seeing the pattern and come around the corner. And in that moment, there was a friend of our family who had been looking out the door. She normally didn't get up early, but she that morning had gotten up to watch her daughter leave for school. It's just one of those. And she even mentions how it was just so random for her to even be there in that moment. But she's standing there. Her daughter had already gone. And she was just still leaning against the door when she said she saw me come around the corner, and I am just hightailing it. And so she opened the door and she said, Maya, what's going on? And I said, there's this guy, he's trying to get me. And she's like, come in. And so she's like ushering me in, and I'm trying to get in there. And I'm starting to tell her the story. And the guy had gotten in his car and had driven, and he drove by. And I said, that's the guy. And she's like, are you sure? And I said, yes, that's the guy. And she's like, come in. And at that point, I had been kind of halfway in and out her house. She pulled me in and she shut the door, and then she went over and she was looking through the blinds and, what do you do? And I'm only 10, 11. She kept looking out and she said, this is interesting. And I said, what? And she said, he's still going back and forth. And she likened it to like a shark, just going back and forth in the water, just circling. And eventually she didn't see him, and she called my mom. My mom couldn't leave from work. I was a latchkey kid. What they say about us, our generation, we were the first latchkey children, and we had to deal with things on our own. And so what do you do? My mom couldn't leave her job at the time, and so I sat there, and then she's like, I think, and she had things to do, and she's like, I think it's safe enough for you to go home. And I left and started to turn the corner for the complex to go toward our house, and he had pulled into a parking space, and he pulled out like he was going to come follow me. And I immediately saw him, ran back to her place, banging on the door. She opened the door. I'm like, he's still out here. And she called the police, and the police showed up. And I remember being, here dealing with all of this, not sure which direction, what do I do? My mom can't be here. And the officer showing up and was asking me questions like, do you remember what kind of car it was? And what did he look like? And I'm trying to explain, but in that moment, you can't recall the important things that they need you to recall. All you can recall is so much of your emotional flood, and you're trying to be helpful. But then I even remember at 10 or 11 sitting there thinking, I'm doing this wrong. Like, I can't help someone who I'm pretty sure wants to help me. And he was a kind officer. And for me at that time, not being able to answer his questions, I just felt like a failure. I felt like he couldn't even help me help myself. And I didn't know what to do with that, but I was trying to be as helpful as I could. And he eventually, I think, got all the information that he needed. And he said, well, we're going to keep sending cars around. And the person whose house I was at, she had things to do. And eventually I went out the back door, went out a different way. And as I was walking toward home, I saw a police officer drive through the community. And it was one of those things of, I remember thinking, I just have a little bit more to get home. But because our community it was a closed loop, he would have to come back around. So if something happens, I know he's going to come back around. So it was like one of those, just in case, I can run the direction that he went, or he's going to be looping back around. So if something happens, I'm relatively okay. Says that.
Right.
And around that same time period, we found out, I can't remember, I think it was a couple weeks, but it may have been months, that was the same time that there were other people that were being kidnapped in our area. And one made national news because they had found her in the bottom of like a porta potty up in the mountains and had been kidnapped. I just remember feeling that mix of disappointment and also remembering running through, what did I do wrong here? Why is this, what did I do? And at that time, again, fundamentalist environment, I'm sitting there looking, like, checking my collar button. Was my collar unbuttoned? Was my shirt not buttoned right? And I know that looking back, they say these things aren't, it's not why someone's attracted to you, but you don't know that.
Right. You're 10.
You're 10. You're 10 or 11. I can't remember exactly. And you're trying to process this big thing. And so there's the experience of, at 5, I had no one. At 10, 11, I had an officer show up who was there, who was present, and yet I couldn't even help him help me. And then the third example is I was 16, 17, I can't remember. We lived in a different area, and all 3 of these incidences happened in totally different parts of the city. So it's not even like, oh, you were in the same part of the city, so this is maybe something you should have been thinking about. Totally different parts of the city, totally different areas, feels of the community. This one, I was walking home from school again in high school, and there were times walking home that I would stop, sit at a bus stop, and then take the bus home. But today I wasn't going to take the bus home. I was just going to walk. It was a beautiful day. And there were times, though, that there would be guys who would kind of pull over and be like, hey, do you need a ride? And I'd be like, nope. Or if I was sitting at the bus stop, they would ask me, do you need a ride? And I'd tell them no. And a few would be a little persistent, but for the most part, they would move on. And this day, there was a guy who I was walking on the right side of the road, and I could sense a car had kind of pulled up beside me. And he was like, he leaned, he had rolled his window down, and he leaned over and he was like, hey, do you need a ride? And I said, no, I'm good. And I just was going to let it go at that. And the next thing I knew, I had come to the end of the street, and he pulled up in front of me and blocked me in. And he said, do you need a ride? And I said, no. And he said, no, do you need a ride? And I said, no, I don't need a ride. I'm fine. And he leaned forward very deliberately and had this eye contact with me. And he said, I'm not asking this time. Get in the car. And that's when the situation, I think there's always those moments for people who have been in these types of situations, a victim. I hate using the word victim, but where you've gone from everything's okay to nothing's okay. Nothing is okay at all at this point. And what do I do? And he's in front of me, blocking me in, telling me to get in the car. And the traffic to my left was a very busy road in the area that we lived in. I think it was 6 lanes. It may have been 5 lanes. I had some friends that lived relatively in the area. And my first thought, I remember thinking, do I run toward them? But I knew that they were probably a good half mile away. That's an immediate discard. I can't go to them. They're closer than my house, I think, but I can't go to them. So I immediately, the only thing I could think to do was I started playing Frogger across the traffic. And it was a busy road, and the lights were always synced up just enough that that road was busy. It was always busy. And so here I am just like dodging lanes of traffic, cars going this way, cars going this way, cars turning in the middle, getting honked at, and I'm booking it across the traffic, and he takes off. And I think, okay, I'm okay. But I'm making it to the other side of the street. And once I made it to the other side of the street, I looked up and I saw that what he had done is he had gone around the block and was waiting to turn, and he was going to be coming down the direction that I was now walking. So we'd be meeting. And I saw that, and I started across the street again, just froggering my way across the traffic. And he passed, and I kind of looked back, and I saw that he was turning again so that he would then be coming back up my way. And I went across the road again. and did that. I don't even know how many times. You just know that you're fighting for your life, you're fighting for survival, and at the same time, like, going through your head, do I try to flag down a car? What do I do? What if it's another bad person? At this point, bad people could be anywhere. What if I raise a fuss, would somebody help? Is there anybody that would care? And of course, at that point, hearing stories of people like in New York City hollering for help, and people are just not caring. And it wasn't even so much that awareness or dismissal. It was just like, this is on me. This is on me. And I kept going back and forth. We did that several times. I don't know how many times we did that. But at one point, I did look back and I saw that there was someone who looked like a student from my school. I only could tell because she looked like she was a student. I didn't know her. I didn't know her at all. But I looked back and I saw her walking toward where I was, and I ran toward her. And I said, I'm so sorry, but I have this guy that's following me. Can you help me? Can I go to your house? Is there any way that I can go to your house and call the police? And she said, sure. And at one point, he had come by, and I pointed him out. I'm like, that's the guy. And she immediately shoved me to the inside, away from the road. And I still think about that gesture of how she was probably my age. And yet she was putting herself between me and him. Mm-hmm. And whoever she is, bless her. I just want her life to be amazing, because she was amazing. And so he went around again. And at that point, there was almost a confrontation the second time when he came by. And she was making it clear by her body language, you're going to have to go through both of us. And I'm sitting there going, now I've put someone else in danger. What do I do? Now I feel bad because I'm still scared. And yet for her, what if I also put her in danger? Now it's two of us. Two can outnumber one, but if he's a guy and he has a weapon, then what? And so I'm sitting there feeling guilty and yet wanting to get to her place. And at one point, the last time that he came by us, he slowed down and he very deliberately looked at both of us. And the look on his face was rage and menace and malice. And if he could have run us over, I think he would have. But we were on the sidewalk and he's not going to wreck his car. So we got to where near her house was. And she had the presence of mind to say, wait. And she kind of held me back a little bit. And she was watching, and he was taking another turn to loop back around. And she waited until we couldn't see his car. And then she said, run. And she grabbed my arm and we took off running, and she got me to her house. And we got into the house and she immediately called the police. And she's like, I have to go to work and there are things that I need to do, but you can stay here. Let the police talk to you. Stay here however long you need. And then when the police showed up, I even had a moment of, do I even answer the door? Right. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this is the police. But then you hear the stories of the people that dressed as police. And then you're like, is this really the police? Are you really who you say you are? Are you here to save me, or are you here to hurt me? And, it's just all of these things that are just flooding your system. But when the police officer got there, he was so kind. And I just remember in that moment when I fully could lean into, here was someone who could help. Just the relief I felt of, I don't have to do this by myself. And I'm also not putting this other person in danger anymore. And here's someone who can take care of the situation. And he was just so gentle when he was asking me questions about, like, do you remember what the guy looked like? What kind of car was it? All I could tell him was the color, pea green. And that was common among several of the people who had tried to pick me up. So, like, pea green is not my favorite car color. If I see that, I'm looking at you a little bit like, what kind of person are you? Not fair, but it's just one of those things, And so I was answering some of these questions, and then he is like, how far do you live from here? And I was like, really not that far at all. And I think he could tell that I was just so shaken. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm technically not supposed to do this, but I'm going to take you home. And he said, just so you know, and he was letting me know ahead of time, which I was very grateful for. He said, just so you know, the car's going to lock on you. Don't be afraid of that. I can still get you out of the car if you need that. Like, his presence of mind of recognizing what I was probably facing and dealing with is astronomical. I don't know what training that officer had, but he was amazing. He really was so thoughtful. And he got me in the car, and I remember just finally in his car sitting there, like I heard the door lock, and there was that moment of panic, but then also at the same time, like, they can't get me now because I'm in the officer's car, and there's this space that protects me and this officer that represents that. And as we were driving to my house, I was feeling that, like, that relief that just comes. And at the same time, across the radio came a report of a girl that had just been found in a warehouse that they estimated between 13 and 14 years old. And sorry, I tell myself I won't cry, and I do, just, because I'm sitting there and I remember thinking, they described her clothing. She was wearing a red sweater and blue jeans. And I remember looking down at myself, and I was wearing a white t-shirt with long sleeves to past the elbow because we were good girls. We didn't dress immodestly. And I was wearing a jumper that went to the floor. And, my collarbone was covered. My elbows were covered. And I was wearing white t-shirt and a blue jumper, and she was wearing a red sweater and blue jeans. And I just the things that come to mind, like, I sat there thinking, this is America. Red, white, and blue. And I'm in a police car that represents the security and the safety that we look for in our officers. And here I'm safe and someone isn't. And what do you do with that? How do you process that? And I think either he looked in the mirror and could see my face, or just had the presence of mind where he just flicked it off, his radio off. And I don't think you're supposed to do that as an officer, but he did. And immediately started making chit chat, small talk, how's your mom doing? All of those things. And he got me to my house, and he was very kind and said, "Are you sure you're okay to go in?" "Yes, I'm home." "Are you sure you don't need me to call someone else for you?" "No, I'm okay." And he's like, "Well, I'm going to sit out here for a couple minutes. So once you get inside, if you need to look out, I'll still be here. And then we're going to also probably start rolling some units around here just so you feel safe." And they did. He did. Like, I think he sat there for a good 10, 15 minutes, and he could have just been filling out the paperwork, but just knowing that he was there while I'm inside processing what just happened. Here are 3 different experiences, and how could I not think of those other experiences that I had too as I'm processing this one? And I remember just feeling that overwhelming relief, that sense of, I made it home. And I've had to talk to my mom about it. And, for me, being a child raised as I was always under the ministerial instructive that if you're a good person, good things will happen to you. God will make sure good things happen to you. If you're a bad person, bad things will happen. Here I'm a child. And how do you process that? And yet, as I've been talking to my mom about some of these things later in life, one of the things that she pointed out when I mentioned, why did you not see this as something that could be impacting me? For her, it was, well, you made it home. And the police officer was there, or these other people were there, or, God provided. And yet for me, it was trauma. And yet, as what we've been talking about here, we do need the police officers. And if I hadn't had that one that showed up on that last round, I don't know what would have happened. Who would you call? What do you do in those situations?
I wanted to ask you, did they catch any of the assailants?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's also part of what hangs out there.
Yep.
And it is one of those things that at one point, I think it was after the one when I was 16, that I think it briefly crossed my mind, what if this is the same person? How do they know who I am? And am I safe down the road? Am I safe in the future? So shortly after that experience, where I went over to the store that was behind our house, and as I was about to go in, I saw the guy, the one who had just tried to, I don't know, weeks or months again, tried to tell me to get in his car. He was washing the windows for the store. And I remember just that moment of terror of, what do I do? And I ran home and I made sure he didn't see me. I ran home. And of course, as an adult, you're like, well, you could have gone inside. You could have said, there's this guy. Can the police come? But in that moment, you're not thinking those things. You're just thinking, get away, run, get away. And clearly, my freeze, flight, or fawn response is to run.
Yeah.
When I was in college, that it hit me. If I had called the police, maybe they would have gotten him.
Right.
Maybe they would have had a predator off the street. And what if he was the guy that did hurt the girl that they had found in the warehouse, and then he was just on looking for someone else?
Yeah.
You know, it's all of those things that go through your head, and you go, for me, I used it as more guilt and shame. I didn't help. I didn't get this bad guy off the streets. I couldn't do anything, and I should have. And that's something that I'm still working through.
Maya, thank you for being here today. And as you say the words, I'm still working through, it is a process. Everyone is different. I'm not a doctor or anything close to it. I'm simply relatable through experience. This is what the I Need Blue podcast is about: being relatable, understanding, and listening to each other. For some, sharing and not feeling alone is a healthy step to take. Only you know what is best for you. If your day is here and you want to share your story, reach out to me on our website, www.ineedblue.net. To hear this podcast and all of the I Need Blue episodes, visit www.ineedblue.net, or you can listen on any podcast platform. Again, thank you to our police officers, our law enforcement, and all of our first responders. Thank you for listening to I Need Blue, and we look forward to you joining us next time.